I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Belvedere Town Council at 7 p.m., November 9th, 2015 meeting, 2015 meeting. If you'd now join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll now read the open public meeting statement. In accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, notice of this meeting was given by way of notice filed with the Star Gazette and/or the Express Times, filed in the municipal clerk's office, and posted in Belvedere Town Hall, 691 Water Street, Belvedere, New Jersey. This agenda is subject to last-minute additions and / ordination by the Belvedere Town Council. Roll call, please.
Mayor Sterling.
Here.
Councilman Kennedy.
Here.
Councilman McAtoy. Councilwoman Myers. Here. Councilwoman Napolitano. Here. Councilman Petrie.
Here.
Mayor Spurgeon. Mayor Seafold.
You got promoted there. And I don't think he wants the job. Thank you. We will now move for approval of the minutes of the October 19th, 2015 regular and executive meetings. Motion to approve minutes. Second. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or corrections? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries full. All right, we'll start off the evening with public comment. Maximum of 30 minutes with 5 minutes allowed for each speaker. And if you could, please go to the podium if possible and state your name and address and who's going to go first.
Nick Weinstock, 207 Water Street. Every time the library issue comes up, I'd just like to say the same thing over and over again. I find it's a waste of resources for the town. The library is pretty poor comparatively compared to the county library. I'm paying double for my taxes go towards the local library, which is worthless to me. I have to pay the $155 a year to go to the county library to actually get any use from it. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? If not, no one? All right. Then we will move on down to matters to be addressed. Belvedere Free Public Library Finance. And I believe, Teresa, you have a presentation. Yes. You'd like to present.
Could I start, please, if you don't mind? I don't mean to interrupt you, but as president of the board, I just thought I would make a brief introductory remark. A couple meetings back, we asked the liaison for the library if she would be so kind as to take an issue before the town council, which was namely to ask them to rescind a town council resolution of February the 21st, 2012. It was resolution number R2012-18. And that had to do with the sense of the then town council to pass along all the expenses of maintenance for the Belvedere Free Public Library onto the Board of Trustees. It's my understanding that, and Laurel, stop me if I'm wrong, you did a good job of presenting that to the council and asking them to consider our request. Later on, Laurel came back to us and indicated that town council would like to hear from us, that questions came up when she made the report to the town council. That's my understanding, that's the main reason why we're here this evening and why Teresa will be presenting. I just wanted to say that to make it very clear, to really put a point on things, that the reason that the library board of trustees and the library director, almost all of us are here this evening, it was in response to our request and council's expression that they had some questions for us. Thank you very much. Thank you. Pardon me for interrupting you, Teresa.
That's quite all right. As Harry stated, we are here to discuss that issue and also to clear up some other questions you might have. Now, good evening. I'm here this evening at your invitation to discuss library finances. I request that I may remain seated. I have a problem with my left. New Jersey state law mandates that municipalities with local libraries allocate, at the very least, funding according to the 1/3 a mil formula. With this formula, local libraries receive 33 cents for every $1,000 of assessed property value. In other words, property owners assessed at $100,000 would pay $33 a year. Most municipalities fund the library above this minimum amount, and we are one of the lowest funded libraries in the state. The drop in property values since the recession has translated into lower levels of funding and has forced the Belvedere Public Library into substantial supplementing of our minimal municipal funding for the past decade. This is decimating the library bequest funds. For example, in 2015, this year, we received $58,055 in municipal funding. This amount is $21,000 less than what we received in 2001. I want you to think of the challenge that is to pay today's prices with 26% less than you had in funding 16 years ago. The taxpayers of Belvedere have benefited greatly by the use of the library bequest and the grants to supplement the minimum funding from the town. Since 2001, the library board has supplemented $340,281 to make up the shortfalls in funding. Our bequest cannot sustain this, and we are now asking that the resolution that we pay for all repairs to the building at 301 2nd Street be rescinded. This would give us some breathing room. In the past 25 years, the library board has paid approximately $200,000 in repairs, and we received 2 Warren County grants that provided another $95,000 in upgrades. The building is in fine condition. The only issue there might be minor repairs or the boiler. As a primary educational resource in our community, the library not only helps to supplement the school systems and provide educational and entertainment resources to the community, but by having a library in your town, this also increases your property values and the desirability of businesses to locate here, thus creating an excellent return on monies spent. I know 2 things for certain. One is that equalized valuations document a very slow return of viable funding. Second is that the town council and the library are partners in serving the community good. We are all in this together, and I have faith that you will consider this request with the respect with which it is made. I invite you to visit the library. If you have any questions, I invite you to please call me, get in contact with me, come in. I love to talk about it and show people around, and I thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you.
Okay, any questions from council? there any motions to be made considering the resolution?
Mayor, we asked everyone to be here because the request to rescind that resolution also puts additional financial considerations on the taxpayers, because our budgets have been crafted for the last 5 years without that expense built into it. So I think that's an opportunity, this is more money being spent, and I think that's something that the general public should have an opportunity to weigh in on.
Well, I think that is correct, and I think when the general public would have the full facts of what we've put into the building and how we have supplemented each year the minimal funding that we've received. Mr. Weinstock spoke about the library. He came in one time or 2 times. We would love to be able to provide what the county has, but we're a different business. To provide things like this, you have to have the funding. Now, Belvedere, our library is rated above average by the Hennon Public Library System rating, and that's national. We are rated 200 points higher than another local library that this past year received $350,000 worth of funding. Think about that. Think about the value that the taxpayer is getting here for that $21 per capita when the state average is $65. We are saving and have saved the town a lot of money. But, things only go so far. Unless we become a mint and start making our own dollars, we need to reach out to you. We have been a good partner, I feel, in that I have never come and asked for additional funding, although it was needed. I always thought, well, I'll keep on with the grants, we'll keep on doing this. Next year's going to change. When you see the funding overview, what do you see? You see a change, all right, but this way, and a large change, especially with something that is minimally funded. What you have is something that is a good part of the community, been here for 91 years. We have not spent any money in the last 2 years to do any repairs. We did have an unexpected expense for exit lights, that was it. So in a way, I don't think that it's going to be a great burden. I would not ask if I felt it was going to be. But we certainly do need to work in partnership, because after a decade and a half, we can't keep this up.
If I could add, in response to your request, Councilwoman Myers. In actuality, all we're asking for is throw us a lifeline. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be dollars associated with it this year. In fact, we feel that the likelihood of it costing you anything in 2016 is low, because we've had so many repairs made. We've caught up on everything. But we'd like to feel that, as Teresa pointed out, that you're partners with us, and that you do understand that any money that we spend additionally would be catastrophic on our reserve of funds, which is really the bequest money. Now, in answer to the gentleman that spoke about the county library, all I can say is simply this. The county library, and I can't give you a specific number, except to say that the county library, on a per capita basis, is funded at a much higher level than the Belvedere Free Public Library is funded. You can say what you want, everybody has their own opinion as to the degree of services, but the bottom line is he chooses to pay for a separate membership at the county. My own children choose to do that, but they're not here complaining about it, because there are many members of this community that can't afford to do that. And the money that's taken out of their taxes to support the Belvedere Free Public Library is significantly less than what it would be, what they would be forced to pay if it went for the county. Everybody knows this, even though I can't give you a specific number, but I believe the law says, as a minimum, the county library gets a half a mil compared to our third of a mil, and that's only for starters. I believe, even though I don't have the numbers from the county, because they're not easy to get, that the county is currently giving them far more than that minimum half a mil. Again, to the gentleman that spoke, I understand his dilemma. My own children choose to pay their taxes in the town of Belvedere and also separately pay for membership to the county library because it affords them more hours of operation and more, especially entertaining things. But that's their choice. There are many people in this community who frankly can't afford to make that choice. So that's one of the things that you have to weigh. Again, the request tonight is simply throw us a lifeline. We don't expect that you're going to have to add extra money to your budget this year, but it's a start. It's a start towards, towards the partnership that Teresa spoke about. All we're asking is to take that onerous resolution off the books for the time being. That's it.
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to address the library board and ask a couple of questions. Harry, you're absolutely right. The town is required to contribute a third of a mil versus a half a mil. There's no question there whatsoever. There is no question there whatsoever on a short haul right now. As the funds are left available to the library, the town library is indeed cheaper than the county library. No question about that. Here's my issue, and it's been my issue for greater than 2 years now. We know that the resolution was created to maintain your own library for good reasons. And I don't know if John has changed his opinion since the statement of February 20th of 2012, where he voted without question that this should be done while he was on council. So one question begs why he should be differing now than when he did back then. The other issue is where in response to the gentleman that spoke about not being satisfied with the library, you're right, it's everybody's opinion. The two libraries, in my personal opinion, are not apple to apple, based on functions and services provided, hours that are provided. So my concern with it is, as we move forward, we're going to continue to spend a lot of money. The library is just to get through what I projected in 2014 to 16 or 17. And this is why I invited Mr. Mooney here again. I've also given you some bit of updated information when you came in on where I felt with the CFO and her numbers, where you were at. On December 31st of 2014, you had in the amount of liquid funds available to you, roughly $94,700, starting on January 1st, 2015. This year alone, you deducted roughly from that liquid cash, roughly $46,000 to $48,000, which leaves you liquid cash going into next, and this year is not over with yet, so you could possibly hit $50,000. So, and that's not including with your operating expenses. That's not even including what you paid personally for electric and heating and air conditioning. So you are going to hit $55,000 to $60,000 minus from that $94,000 you have left. So it's very possible by January of, I know you're shaking your head, Teresa, and I'll be glad for you to give a response, and that's why I have Mr. Mooney here. You're probably going to be around $40,000 left in available funds to use starting next year if you don't touch the stocks. The stocks are another whole issue, and I'll get on that if I need to shortly. That's a whole different situation. My point is, if you're starting 2016 with only roughly $40,000, that liquid cash you have is not going to be enough to stand you through all of 2016. You have to rely on something else. And we all know that's your investments in the stocks. and there's question or not, whether or not you should be retaining that. I did look up several library laws and statements, and they're pretty adamant and they're very clear as where your investments are supposed to be as far as money markets, state of New Jersey trust funds and whatnot. And from what I found out, I think the reason that is basically because of what you sustained this last 14 months, 16 months in your stocks. Now, everybody knows stocks are up and down. Sometimes it's a good investment, sometimes it's a bad investment. Unfortunately, at year end of 2013, January 1st of 2014, your stock value was $159,000 and change. As of 10/31 of this year, only a year and a couple months later, the stock value is only $92,000. So you sustained a significant loss, okay? Not knowing stocks and the way they go right now, you have a great potential because it's a transportation stock and it's an energy stock. They can continue to go down. My point for explaining all of this is whether you have sustainable finances to get through to 16 or 17, the bottom line is when the funding is done for the library and you've used your bequest fund, and $1/3 is obviously not going to be enough to sustain you alone, with salaries alone roughly to 100 to 103,000. Let me finish, please. Let me finish. You have salaries and benefits and pensions that equal roughly $102,000, $103,000 a year. That is correct, okay? And at one time, I even reviewed this with you and gave you the information, okay? That's not the issue here. The issue here is on average, if you look at a 5-year history, your annual budget costs you anywhere from $100,000 to $115,000 a year. Now, keep in mind, you've done a phenomenal job this past year, and even last year. There's no argument there. Here's where the question and the concern for me is when you ask about the value of, our library versus the county library and what each library offers. Once the town of Belvedere gets to a point where we have to finance the entire Belvedere library, which is going to happen. It's going to happen, Nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know what the $1/3 is going to equate to. Last year was 58,000 and change. This year, I believe it's around 60,000 per year numbers. So we don't know exactly where it's going to be, if the economy is going to get better. Here's the fact of the matter. How long do we wait before we put the full burden of this library on the taxpayer? That's the big question. Now, to give you one more estimate, and I'm going to have Mr. Rooney highlight this for me. If we get to the point where the town of Belvedere has to finance the library 100%, that's when the question is, where is it cheaper, the county library or the Belvedere library? And Mr. Rooney, at this time, I'll let you jump in with the work that was done.
Excuse me a moment.
Yes.
When you stated, and this is misinformation
Okay.
that has been going around and has come back and has personally impacted me
Right.
several times.
Mhm.
How could our costs be $104,000 for the year when you're stating that salary and wages and benefits are that amount? That was for everything, for utilities, for purchases of books, for running the thing.
Director, if you look at the 2015 and the 2014 budget that you proposed roughly $66,500 for salaries. On the next caption below it, you also included what the pension and benefits would cost, which was roughly $30,000. So it's in your director's report that listen, we're not here to tit for tat or what's going on.
No.
Here's my concern is, the concern is, once the funds and the monies are gone, the question is going to be, for us to sustain the full cost of this library, you can't sit there and convince me or anybody else that it's going to be cheaper. So now here's what it comes down to. And this is my opinion, and the only thing that I'm asking. When we start and as we get to this point, I will do anything that the taxpayers and the public of this town wants to do. This is why we need to move along, and because time is of an essence, okay? When you look at the documentation and the work that has to be done, if this library starts to default, you're looking at a 1-year period plus to get a referendum written, to get it on the ballot. This is why it's important, once again, and then last time we did it was 1996. I know it failed terribly. Did all the history on it. The fact of the matter is almost 20, 30 years has elapsed. We have new people in town, we have the same old people in town, who I understand is very passionate about it. And if the majority of the people come out and they say, Mr. Kennedy, we want this library kept, then we're obligated to do what they want. So I'm only looking at evaluation here. I'm not looking at it any other way. And I've only brought it up because this is very time sensitive to do this. Now, I've asked Mr. Mooney to put some numbers together for me, and I'll turn it over to John.
Actually, before we go on, so that the misconception that Teresa Eicher is making 100,000 out there, I will allow
I said
her.
employees, I said salaries.
I will, this
More
is
than
what,
one. I
this
said
is,
salaries.
Joe, excuse me, I'm speaking. This is Joe, this is exactly, Joe, what Teresa Eicher, unfortunately, has been having to deal with. When statements are made like that, people take it very generally. So please correct that.
Yes.
I've corrected it several times.
Joe,
before.
Excuse me.
Joe, I
Sir.
have, Teresa has the floor,
Sir.
please,
I think
thank you.
that everyone deserves to be treated with respect.
That is correct.
That is correct. And that means that when you say something, I have printed out documentation, I have a printed documentation list of what everyone in town makes according to their salary. Now, I have been misrepresented out in the public for the last 2 years, and I have paid a price for that. Do you know what a beginning librarian makes an hour? Beginning, no experience. I have 23 years of experience. No experience. $41.20 an hour. I don't even make what a beginning desk clerk in a library would make, which is $27.90 an hour. To say that the salaries are $104 when people know we are a bare bones operation. They know who's working what hours. Things don't change there. To say that is very misleading to the public. And there are people who don't come in the library, who listen to hearsay, who follow it and go and carry it. And we've suffered greatly from that. Now, what you're talking about was going ahead. Why couldn't the library and the town council, why couldn't we work together and we say, you know what, all these years you've been so underfunded. We will fund you at $10,000 above the third of a mil. We are one of the few libraries in the state of New Jersey that is receiving only the third of a mil because people in communities value their libraries. They want a safe place for their children to be able to walk and to go to after school. They don't want their kids being exposed to drugs or being out not knowing where they are. Not every parent comes home when school lets out. A lot of children are left alone. Our library has been a safe place and has provided very wonderful services that I don't think a lot of people think of. So,
May I address your statements now, please?
mhm.
Okay. As I corrected myself more than a year and a half on the error of saying salary versus salaries. If everybody wants clarity, the Belvedere Town Library has 3 employees. They have the director, Mrs. Eicher, her husband, Mr. Ralph Eicher, and another person. And when I look at all of these issues, and I look at these issues of concerns, it's not a question about, Ms. Eicher, what you give to us, because we've always got along. That's not an issue. The issue for me all along is the financial issue. And as I get deeper and deeper looking into library laws and library requirements, I don't think you'll argue the point with me that per capita, based on the amount of people we have in the town of Belvedere, we are required to be open a minimum of 30 hours a week.
Correct.
With the exception, if you can't be open 30 hours a week, you have to be open 1,500 hours a year. Now, looking at historical history over the last couple years or so, we have neither not been open 30 hours a week, and we neither have not been open 1,500 hours a week. So there's concerns and issues that I have here for what we're providing to the public, and I understand how tough it is for us to financially sustain it. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the cost of what we're paying for a library that's open 24 hours a week versus on what we should be open, and the limited amount of numbers that we're even supposed to be open at night, we're not providing that for the dollar and cents that we're putting in. Whether we have the money or not, we're not providing it.
And
Let me
we're not
finish, let me finish, please, and then you can respond. I'd be more than glad to answer that. You know, every week, pay periods, we're paying roughly 76 hours a pay period, you know, for a library that's open 48 hours every 2 weeks versus a payroll of 76 hours. You know, these are some of the things that, you know, that I think need to be addressed. And I can only offer, I've offered them when I was the liaison. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did I not offer an open house several times at the library?
Yes, you do.
Never happened. Never,
And
never,
that
never,
is
and I'm not, that's not,
acceptable.
listen, we're not finger pointing here. The public and everybody has to understand the facts. And I want the people to know everything, so if it goes to referendum, I think that people have the choice. Now, if we can, just let Mr. Mooney give some cost, that would help.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
There were, I was sitting there listening, and there were several points that were made that were very accurate, and I was going to make them in my presentation as well. I'm not prepared as far as rescinding the 2012. I wasn't aware that that was on the docket for tonight, but I did want to speak on behalf of the expenses and the contributions to the library. Ms. Eicher pointed out that in 2015, the third of the mill is going to be $58,000. We've been performing the audit since 2011, and back in 2011, that was $89,000. So you can see that assessment come down over the years. I mean, you're talking about a pretty big chunk of change, $31,000 over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. When you look at that, though, it's not the fault of the library that those numbers have come down, but it's not your fault either. This is a statutory requirement that you contribution to the library, and that's by law all that you have to give. There is nothing that states that you should give or you could give. You can give as much as you want, but statutorily, that's what you're bound to provide. Okay? Now, over the years, when we've done the audits, we've come up with expenditures anywhere from one year was $111,000, another year was $117,000. In 2014, it was down to $106,000. That's salaries, wages, that's everything. When you look at 2014 as a whole, the library had to come up with an additional $44,000 to cover their expenses for the year of 2014. So you are looking at the library using their own funds to continue funding the library to meet the expenses and keep the lights on and keep the people paid. Where the concern comes in is, and Mr. Kennedy made this point, and I think this is an excellent point, is the money is leaving the library at a rapid rate. Not only are you spending on average of $45,000 to $46,000 a year over the past few years, you're also losing a lot of value on your stock. When we came in with the stock, it was around $154,000. At the end of 2013, $159,000. At the end of 14, it was $121,000. Now we're looking at $92,000. So just that 1 year, from 14 to 15, your full 10 months, you're down about $28,000 in value. So on top of the $45,000 roughly that you used during the year, you're also losing another $28,000 with the loss of the stock. Now, the stock market's the stock market. It could go up tomorrow. You can't yet, but that's the whole reason why we are not allowed as governing entities to hold stock. There's too much volatility in the market. They want you to put it into safe, secure funds so that you don't see this decline of $50-something thousand over the course of 2 years. So you have made points on both sides, and My concern is that if you're gonna be using that money and losing that money, and if the trend continues, you're looking at about $70,000 a year that's coming off of your books, your fund balance. And right now, at the end of 14, your fund balance was $200,000. If you lose $70,000 this year, now you're down, a lot lower, 130. Where do we go from there? That's the question, and I think that's the question that's being brought up. We don't show you as a going concern. As auditors, we have to offer opinions. One of the opinions that we can give you is a going concern. A going concern means you're not going to be able to make your expenses next year. Bad opinion. We're not at that point yet, but there's got to be a management plan to come in to address these issues going forward, and I think that's what we're doing here tonight. I think Mr. Kennedy wanted me to come and bring it to your attention. Now, Mr. Brown made a good point. We looked into, and we were here in June, July, we sat with the library meeting. I sat in on a meeting, Councilman Kennedy was there, Mayor Stetler was there, Mr. Politani was there, Councilwoman Politani, and we discussed this. And I was in conversation with Dan Olszewski, who's the CFO of the county, and he gave me some pretty specific numbers. One of the numbers he gave me was what it would have cost you in 2014. It would have cost the town of Belvedere $95,000. Now, this is an estimate on his behalf, but he gave me some pretty accurate numbers for it to be an estimate. In 2015, he said it would be $91,000, almost $92,000. So this is where you look at, if we fully fund the library in 2014, the town would have spent $106,000 to fully fund it, whereas if they funded the library tax for the county, it would have been $95,000. And I think we're at a point now where it's, it goes tilted back and forth, that some years it's better to be in the county system, you pay less tax, other years it's better to be in the town system. One thing that's not being picked up on, though, with the county tax, is if there's a capital project. You have to keep this in mind if this is an idea that you have going forward of joining the county. If there's a capital project and the county decides to build a new building, it falls on the back of the taxpayers that fund the county tax for the library. So that would be your portion. Right now, there's no look to the future to see anything immediately that there's going to be any capital projects. But if that comes down the line, that's where the rate can go up, and it will go up. So there were points made on all sides, but these are the numbers that are before you, and it's the future. It's the next couple of years that you have to look to get through. On top of the, if you start to fund your own expenses for the boiler project and all that, that's going to further, speed this up. So, if anybody has any questions, that's what I'm here for.
I do, actually.
Sure.
With other public libraries, do the library itself separately, with their funds, pay for a town employee's pension, or does the town pay for the pension?
In the libraries that I personally deal with, I see the third of the mill being kept, just like it is here, in town hall to pay for library expenses. Those expenses for salaries, for health benefits, for PERS, all that is a library expense, but the money never leaves the town. Checks are all cut from the third of the mill. Once that third of the mill is done, and I think you're probably going through about July where you're pretty much out of the third of the mill, then the library has to start reimbursing the town for any checks that they cut on behalf of salaries, benefits, and it's the same thing across the board in towns that I do, like Butler Library, Dover Library. These are bigger towns and they get more, Ms. Iger is correct, where they get more money.
Well,
You're talking about,
right.
substantially larger towns and municipalities. It's the nature of where you are right now.
And county libraries, the same thing? The budget is entirely separate, or are the county employees that work there considered the library or considered
They are county employees.
And do they get their pensions paid from the library, or half of the mill, I should say?
It's a half of the mill for the library.
Right.
I believe, and don't quote me because I'm not 100% sure, I believe they can go even higher than the third of the mill and ask for more. When I was talking to Mr. Olszewski, when I was talking to him, he was saying that that covers, what they charge covers their operations for the year. So they make sure that they know what they're going to spend, and then that's when they strike the tax to cover everything. Okay, they're not dipping into reserves or anything like that. The taxes that they collect is purely for operations, and that covers everything,
So
salaries included.
by law, they can go more than the half of the mill?
I believe.
Could you
that-
do research on that for us?
Absolutely.
I believe you're correct. I've been told informally by a couple of freeholders that they do give them an appropriation that exceeds half a mil. Nobody seems to know what that number is,
You know, in some places, you'll see the third of the mill for the library be established, and the library knows what they're getting, and then they base their expenditure portion of their budget on that third of the mill. If the county library knows what their expenses are going to be, and they work back to what they collect. So that's where the difference in the way the thinking goes.
Why is it that we can never get anything in written form from the county to verify numbers?
I can do my best to try to get you something in writing from somebody. I don't know the answer to that.
Excuse me, I do know the answer. It's because when you have the formula that Mr. Olszewski has, this is an estimate, and it's like, let's say you buy a car, and then you have the add-ons, the different things that you may want, or that they may need that year. Now, the state puts out a report, an analysis and ratio report for each year, and that has it, everything, every library in the state broken down by per capita use. So that is easily, you're easily able to compare that. Now, the per capita use in the last analysis that I received and went over, they were always 2 years behind, was $63, it was almost $64, so $63.80-something cents. And our per capita use was $24.14.
okay, so let me ask
So
you.
that's
could
the
I
way
stop you
to-
right there and just ask you, just for information purposes. So what you're telling us is that overall, that's how the two compare. So
Yes.
would it be logical that if an individual citizen proportionalize that, in other words, compared the 20-something to the 60-something, okay? And then came up with a fraction that represented that, and then multiplied that times the number that's on their own personal tax return, they'd be able to tell how much more it would cost them for the library, from a logical mathematical standpoint.
From a mathematical standpoint, I guess so, but remember, the state library, this is their expertise
Right.
that goes into it and everything. They know what costs are without estimates. Because estimates on these things can go 15, 25,000. When you're working with millions, it's not a big, as big a deal as it is to us.
If I can just interrupt for 1 minute. I don't know where those numbers are generated from. Okay? I know based on what we've done here in town, where your numbers come from. Okay? Just looking at 2014, and to break it down for the year, per capita or per average local taxpayer paid $57 for the year to fund the $61,000 of the library third of the mill. If the township, if the town funded that entirely, okay,
Is that per household?
that is that's the third of the mill, when Teresa
So the
explained
value
it.
of the property
Value of the property,
per household?
$57 per year. If you funded that 100% of all the expenses for 2014's library, that would bring you up to $100 per household even to cover those expenses. If, and we're saying the library is an estimate, but Mr. Olszewski, I don't know if he doesn't want to put his name to it, or not, I don't know. I don't know what the ramifications are. But when I asked him what this was, he said, hold on just 1 second, I'll do the calculation now. He's got a spreadsheet, he's got his formulas, when he puts your assessed values in, and he puts what you're in, 95,835 was his answer. That it would have cost you in 2014. That's a pretty specific number. He didn't say it's about 100,000 or, right? He had a pretty definitive number. And that would have cost the township, an average local taxpayer, $91. So these are just the thing, and if I can get something in writing, if I could do something and help you get something in writing, I will. I don't know I don't know why they're not giving you.
Well, it kind of makes you nervous because, you know, somebody has a great thing and, you know, they're telling you about all bells and whistles, and finally when you get that bill, it's not what you talked about, and then it's too late. And that would be a crying shame.
Excuse me,
Sure.
I do have the figures, I do have the copy of the analysis, I have what ours is, local tax support per capita, and I do have what the county's is per capita here. I have the page numbers, and I have what the amounts are, what it would be against what Belvedere paid for the library and what the county would cost. Now, this is from the New Jersey State Library. This is very precise.
And I understand it is, but the only thing that I'm getting at is that's per capita, so that's per people who live here. That's not, people who are paying the tax want to know how much it's costing me per 100,000. This is what, it could be $24 per capita, but for an average local taxpayer, it's $57.
Right. But
So,
I think that the
You're
thing-
looking at the benefit that you get from the library per capita on that, and that's for your argument, that's great. But just to give, I'm a numbers guy, just give the numbers as they stand, and that's it. We're the auditors are the guys that come in and pay and have the wounded after the war. So we come in after the fact. So I have everything in the time that we audited, and that's just to give you the most current information of where you are.
And actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a house that's $500,000,
I'm sorry, I said one.
okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not, everybody's gonna get that same charge on their tax bill. It's going to depend on what the amount of their property.
Right, this is why the average
So-
local taxpayer.
Exactly, so what could happen is, if you have a house that literally is up there, you're gonna pay a heck of a lot more than the person that has the $100,000 house.
Correct, but your local rates also, you're gonna pay more on local taxes, school
Exactly.
taxes, across the board.
Right.
This is average, to make it nice and simple, average local taxpayer.
Yeah, I think you're confusing
All right.
the two
Is-
issues, and one is the per capita.
Is there
and
any
one is
other
the- And I think
questions?
it's important to differentiate the two. She's right in hers,
Right,
but they're two different numbers.
right.
Right.
Okay, is there any other questions from council for Mr. Mooney? Now, Kathy, you seem to be wanting to do a referendum, is that what you're speaking of?
No, not the voicemail. I'm just feeling that if we're at this juncture, and it's timely, that if we're gonna spend $100,000 on a library, which library do the taxpayers of the town of Belvedere want to spend $100,000 on? In a general phrase.
Okay,
And if the referendum is the way that we have that vehicle to answer that question, then I think that is the route that we should be considering taking.
now you did state about a referendum would take about a year. Do you have the information?
I don't,
on-
that's why there's no point in pursuing it if that's not what the council feels the direction we should be taking. This is for discussion for our workshop,
For information.
so that we could set up a committee, we could go ahead and get the particulars for what the timelines are from the county clerk's office. Does it have to be a general election? Can it be a primary?
It could be
I don't know any of that.
It could be either one.
My concern is that although we're discussing things at this workshop, we don't have, so to speak, anything really in writing as far as coming direct from the county's CFO. And I don't know why we want to have that. Especially discussing something that's been around for over 91 years. And that's without correct information, without somebody signing their name to something, that makes me clear.
My only thing that I can offer to that is that if you're not getting any information as you're requesting it, or I'm requesting it, and I know Katrina's gonna smile at me when I say this, perhaps legal counsel can turn around and adopt a draft a letter stating that, you know, you're interested in knowing what your portion is, and you'd like to get that in writing.
Okay, that's a suggestion.
And if they could express it in terms of an equivalent millage, it would be much easier to use.
To make it a little more apples and apples.
Yes.
All right, does anybody have any further questions? The library board?
I'd like to summarize if I could.
I'd like to, before you summarize it,
Sure.
I'd like to jump in, and I apologize for being late, but I guess we get hung up. One of the things I did is, as I'm looking over the expenses of the library, I see obviously they're increasing. The town's library portion is paying more, going back to 2007, 24%. As you said, somewhere, it averages out to about 30%, from 2007 till now, an increase in the library's expenditures. I took one piece of property in town, which is a very large piece of property, BASF. If you look at proportionately how the taxes were coming into the town and how we lost the revenue from BASF, and you look at the expenditures from the library portion alone, okay, they just kind of passed each other. Obviously, the expenditures are going up for the library. In 2012 alone, we lost 66%, which it ended up being $245,000. In 2 years alone, $288,000. Just in that one lot on BASF, we lost about 75 to 80% of our tax base for the town. We were getting around 380 to 405, they were the high numbers a year, so $405,000. We're presently getting $78,000. Then the year before that, 81, the year before that, 78. So the question is what we do, as we listen to Mr. Mooney say, it sounds like the library is running out of money. We know the town doesn't have money. And on top of that, we're paying $800,000. So I'm just throwing it out there, when you think about, you know, do we want a referendum, you know, spend $100,000 here, $100,000 there? I don't think we have $100,000 anyway. We just don't have the money. And I came in late, and I think I kind of caught the tail piece of basically the library's looking for more money. I don't know where we can get it. That's just my analysis. Like I said, I took one piece of property. I can go around town and you know, obviously see a lot of other, you know, businesses that maybe were paying a little bit higher taxes than the resident, and they're gone. You know, and we're trying to do the best we can. Since I've been up here for 2 years, and I know some of the council, we've been in touch with BASF as early as yesterday again, actually today, to try and do something with that property, but we need to generate revenue. And if we had revenue, I don't think we'd be having this discussion, you know, but we just need money, just like you need money. So, I'm sorry, Harry, that's my piece.
No, it's, you're expressing, you know, financial reality. The whole, almost the entire state of New Jersey is in the same condition because we've created a state government that's driving business out of the state. It's pretty simple. Anybody who knows anything knows that that's a statewide issue. But at any event, I just want to say a few things about the questions that came out tonight. Number one, I hope we met your information requirements. We came with a little bit different scope in mind. We had a different understanding of what the scope was, but it's fine. More information came out. I think it's always useful. The real, I think what you're really saying, I think what the auditor is really saying, and any person with a business background could say the same thing. There will come a time when the library's out of bequest money, and at that point, something will have to give. Now, there's two ways of looking at that, though. One could be, do you want that to happen in 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, or do you want that to happen in 10 years? A smaller investment, an incrementally smaller investment by the town earlier on would help stretch the library board's money much longer. So that's something that you need, that's a piece of information that you need to take in, consider, before you make a decision. I would agree with you, I would agree with the professionals. The point will be reached eventually unless ratables go up in the community as a whole dramatically, where the library will run out of money and you'll have to make a decision. You know, all we asked for, and the reason we came tonight was that we asked for a lifeline, a little bit of relief should a small emergency arise in terms of the building. That was it. We don't expect it to really be anything of any significance because we really have repaired an awful lot of stuff. You know, we've got it in good shape. I think we would feel better if you could see your way to do that. I didn't expect a decision tonight, however, with respect to that. My understanding was it's informational. As far as the county library is concerned, ultimately, the taxpayers will make the decision. The only thing I would ask, as one of those taxpayers, is that if you ever frame a referendum, you gotta have accurate information in it, so that, very accurate information, and a very well thought out narrative to go with it, so that people really know what it is that they're, what the choices are that they're making. And that is not going to be easy. Now, with respect to having a referendum, since I'm on the Board of Elections, I have a little bit of what you might consider inside information. You could have one at a primary election or a general election. If you do it at a primary or a general, you don't have to pay extra because the poll workers are there, the ballot is there, you know. If you do it any other time of the year, it's a special election and you'd have to pay for it. That's really what the bottom line is. You would need a lot of lead time, I understand, to get the other information and to make that narrative and to get the figures to present fairly to the members of the public. That will indeed take a lot of time. In the meantime, you need to be aware of a very simple fact that every month that passes that the library sustains itself with just a third of a mil, okay, saves the taxpayers in this town money. No matter how you slice it, that's a factoid, okay, from a taxpayer standpoint. Understanding that it will eventually run out. Again, you can stretch it. Give the library board an increment of that, and you'll stretch the time period. As far as when we'll run out of money, you have to understand with the stocks, yes, they have taken a hit, but on the other hand, the dividends haven't taken a hit. So the numbers that you have in there don't reflect the dividends. So even though there is a rate of drawdown, there is some refreshment of new money coming in the form of dividends, which also will stretch that time period out. Okay? I really, is there anything that I missed? I mean, I think it's a business-like analysis. It's not an unreasonable analysis to make. But these are the things that you're going to have to think about. How long, how much, and how. That's really it. I hope we've answered everybody's questions.
Any further questions for the library board coming from the council? Any?
Have you done any type of analysis to say what your projections are before your money runs out?
To be honest with you, no. Good.
Excuse me.
We're all unpaid volunteers, so understand that.
I'm working on a new 5-year plan with trying to restructure the library, the hours, working perhaps with CWEP, with other things that we can to expand and to still stay at the bare bones amount that we have. I think too that when it's presented, most libraries of our size are funded, various fundings, but it's usually above 120,000. So that kind of gives you an idea that we are within range, and we have brought our spending amounts down. We are doing things so that we don't have to spend money. We're working very hard, but I am working on restructuring.
Is there any type of, knowing other small libraries that have any type of sharing that you guys can do to?
Yes,
save
as
this?
a matter of fact, I get calls from small libraries. How can I manage to afford support programs, how can I do this and that? And we do work together. However, when they call me, they're usually far better funded than me, so, that kind of, we're in a difficult position. We've done, I think, very well in managing. We've kept things level, but with the property values going down, the third of the bill going down that much, it's very difficult. I realize you're in a difficult position, we're in a difficult position. You just want to do what's best. And if a referendum is best, I believe, let the people, speak, let them do that. Because a lot of times I know that if you don't use the library, it doesn't exist in your world. But it does exist in the users, and we have a lot of activity going on up there. I just wish that more of the people in this room would come up and, take a look around and experience that. Thank you.
When is your 5-year plan to
I'm working on it now. I should have it done by the end of January. And I've always had a 5-year plan. This is, as Mr. Councilman Kennedy knows, I've always had that, and this is just, I renew it every year.
Any further questions for the board from council? Anything further for John Rooney? And
There
what,
was a question.
Did you quote, and I think I didn't hear you properly, what it would cost, or what it would cost to eliminate the town, go to the county, and then what it costs to continue with the town per?
I gave the numbers for 2014, okay? The numbers that I was provided from the county for the county library number was $95,835. What the township contribution was in 2014 was about $61,000 to the municipal library. The expenses were $106,000, so the library funded approximately $44,000 of its own expense.
Thank you.
okay? I think,
Sue Beal, Ray Street, Belvedere. I have a couple of questions for the library. Did I hear you correctly? You said you had received $95,000 in grants from the county?
Yes.
What happened to the $7,500 a couple of years before that?
That was included, we actually had money that we sent back. We had money left over from the one grant that went back. So
From the 95,000?
Yes, the 95,000 includes that 7.5 that was a couple years earlier, where we did the water remediation and the side entrance.
Why did the library that's not as good as Belvedere get $300,000 and you didn't get any?
Because we're funded at the third of the mill, and most places fund at above that. They fund as they feel the library needs.
That library had 5 times the rate it was. It's that simple.
Yeah, at the same population and the same size, but they had more rateable. And even with that extra money, our rating is still higher because of the variety of materials, the programs that we have, the different things that they rate on the state report with your circulation.
Okay. And I've been told that in order to get a new release from the library, a new book, there's a fine or a fee for it, is that correct?
That has always been since 1961. As a matter of fact, a lot of libraries do that, and that helps so that people don't hold the books like for a month or two. They're new releases, they have a limited shelf life. Plus, that helps a library like us. We charge 10 cents a day now. For 40 years, it was a nickel, and many libraries charge 50 cents.
The county doesn't charge anything, and
But the
it's a
county's
limited
got
time.
millions of dollars in revenue. How can we make revenue when we're a nickel and dime business, literally?
Well,
And
and
that's
their
what we are.
resources are so much better.
Well, yes, they have funding. I agree
You're
with
supposed to
you.
be open 30 hours a week and you're open 24?
Yes, we are open 24 hours. Now, please, this is important, is that 24 hours a week, it was either be open more hours and don't have programs and don't have new materials because we don't have the money. It's got to stretch and fit somewhere. Now, the state library, I write a letter of exemption. They feel so strongly about our library and what we're doing that they have given us half of our state aid for the last 8 years. They're only supposed to extend that to you for 2. But because they know what our library does, and because I work with them, and because they are supportive, they have continued to give us state aid. They fully understand. As a matter of fact, they don't understand how we're able to maintain and do the amount of volume and the programs and all that we do with our funding, even with us putting in the extra funding.
What programs do you have?
Okay, well, now just this last week I had the Third Street School and I have, here you go. I kind of anticipated that people who haven't been in our library and.
Oh, I've been there.
Yes, I know, for the grant I met you the one time. But here you go, those are some of the programs that we have, some of the different things. We have adult programs, we have children's programs.
What programs do you have for adults?
We had feng shui, we had origami, special origami programs. I had a thing about Marie Antoinette where we made dolls of Marie Antoinette. I've had pottery making for Thanksgiving.
Recently?
Yes, this is recent. Yeah,
Your adult programs are recent?
yes. Do you go on our website?
Where, is that where they're
Yes,
listed?
they're listed on our website, yes.
And what are your hours?
We are open the same hours that we have been open for the last 8 years. We are closed Sunday and Monday. Tuesday, we are open from 1 to 7 p.m. Wednesday, we are open from 1 to 5. Thursday, 1 to 7 p.m. Friday, 1 to 5, and Saturday, 11 to 3. Okay? You're welcome. I'm glad you asked. Those were good questions. Okay. Anything further? Thank you, board, for coming in. Thank you, council. It's very easy for the council when they need more money to fund something. In fact, we have funded something new this year. We just raised taxes, actually. And for the library board, they are not able to do that. They're funded out of the mill, and they do need to rely on our services. So hopefully, working between the two will come to a happy meeting. Thank you. I do hope so. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to municipal parking. And I would like to start first by discussing Riverside Park parking. Katrina, we are almost there, correct?
Yes,
With
I
the deed.
received the deed from the county, I have both deeds, we sent them on to the recorded, we're just waiting to get them back. I had the governor's signature and everything, I was telling Teresa, it wasn't a stamp, it was his actual signature on the deed, so feel it, when you sent them for recording, so I will check tomorrow night and see if we got it back.
Do you know approximately when you sent that?
Could you follow us a little bit?
Okay.
You got forgot your hand bag.
How long does it, Kev, you work there, how long does it normally take to get keys recorded?
Turnaround is very quick now that they're online and some of them.
Are we talking like a week or?
At this point, it doesn't necessarily matter when they're recorded, we have, it's as if the closing has happened.
So we're good to
The deeds were
go?
exchanged.
We're good to go.
Yeah, all it is a matter of verifying their information is correct, they record it, and then they stamp it and send it back to the attorney's office.
Okay.
A week?
So we're good to go anyhow, she says we can go
Yeah, it's
ahead.
been sent to the courthouse, but it's good.
I had Teresa put in this evening, actually, for the park portion, the rules and regulations. We have never had rules and regs for the actual parking, Teresa? Not that you know of. So that's something that our attorney advised us that we'll have to do. Just briefly looking at the situation down there, it seems that there is full, the nights I've pulled in repeatedly just to gaze. That parking lot is full at night except for maybe 1 or 2 spots. During the day, it appears to be full, but the thing I did notice is vehicles, and I have been told by some business owners that it's the same vehicles that are just parked there.
Can I jump in there real quick?
Sure, go right ahead.
I saw that it wasn't on the agenda to talk about the parking, but I did see that the Councilman Myers put something else on. So the chief was actually going to be here tonight, and I asked him to hold off, and the reason for that is I wanted to talk about this request from Kathy Myers for something.
Actually,
Let me finish. When we talk about the parking.
we did talk
Oh,
about
okay.
municipal parking, that's what
sorry.
we're gonna discuss.
Well, that's what the chief decided, and I think our attorney will agree, especially when we talk about handicap parking, it's handicap parking for the town as opposed to Riverside Park or. So we collectively decided we're gonna, wait another 2 weeks, come back at our next council meeting, then chief will be here, and he'll be a lot more prepared to at least talk about how we plan on proposing the parking. He came up with some great ideas, and I think rather than going into it now, at least for the parking, I'd kind of like to hold off for 2 weeks. But I think he came up with some outstanding solutions and suggestions, and it's not going to cost the town hardly anything, and actually become, we have the potential of bringing a little bit of revenue at the same time.
Are you discussing Riverside Park you're talking about?
Parking in general for the whole town,
Okay.
by the
Is
courthouse.
there any reason why we can't tentatively discuss
Well,
Riverside tonight?
one of the things we were discussing is, obviously right now enforcement's always been an issue. And when you're running a police department, when you have 1 officer or 2 officers on, especially on a Friday night, they don't have time to worry about whether this car was parked here overnight. They get too many other things. So we discussed the possibility of, my first is the class 1 special, somebody at parking. You hear parking meter reading. But he had a better solution. His solution was, we would possibly be able to hire another class 2 special. That person would come under the authority of the parking authority. So their sole purpose would be to go out and enforce parking rules. The other thing that we looked at is it would be obviously a part-time position. We could set the salary accordingly. But if we ever needed that person for Victorian days or any significant event, they're already a Class 2 certified officer, they could use them, whatever. But the main purpose and their title would actually be parking authority, or parking, whatever we give them, or her, and regulate their hours, whatever way they want them to be. A perfect example would be, this Friday night, we need our parking authority to work from 9 o'clock to 1 in the morning. What a great way to find out if you have somebody open with night parking. So it would allow us to fluctuate the schedule, cost the town nothing, other than the police uniform, and some small expenditures. We don't even need a person to be carrying a firearm if we don't want to. So that's one of the things we were suggesting. And then obviously, as you said, we do really need to revisit the handicap and what's going on throughout the town. So.
Just to ask you a question on that, when you say parking authority, you don't mean creating
No,
a
no,
parking authority?
no.
Maybe authority
Within the
not
police
needed.
department, you can have special officers and you can only have so many. based on-
Sure.
So this person's title is going to be the parking, whatever.
Right.
So it's not, we're not creating.
Yeah, I
anything.
just wouldn't use the word
It's just-
authority because it
It's
confuses
a class 2,
people and they think
yeah, I was thinking of
separate
class,
bank accounts and.
well, I was thinking
Okay.
between class 1 and class 2. Not much in dollars and cents, we're talking like $2, $3 an hour or so. But he said, you know what, if we put it under the title of, the parking,
Kind of like you have crossing guards
Right.
that fall into the police department, you have a
Exactly.
parking person, yes.
it's the exact same thing.
Okay.
So it's not gonna, the PBA is not gonna get upset because we're taking away anything from their staffing and, their overtime issues. It's strictly for parking. And again, we've had, in the last year or 2 years, we've had a lot of complaints about the courthouse. Rotate, Wednesday you work whatever hours, go from work by the courthouse. Work downtown, work business district. I think, and I didn't have the statutes in front of me, but the parking violations are about $50 a piece. And that's municipal money. And I don't want to make it a revenue generating thing, but it becomes very evident that if you have an individual out there for 2 or 3 hours, and they write 4 or 5 summonses, they've more than covered their expenses. And again, I don't want to make it a revenue thing, but I don't see a downside to it, unless the individual doesn't do their job, and that's very easy to find out. It does take a lot of pressure off the officers too. It's one less thing they have to worry about.
I think given the fact that over the last few years, and the mayor's correct, the businesses and residents alike have been dissatisfied with the enforcement of parking anyway. We've actually hurt businesses in town because people, they drive around the corner 2-3 times, they can't park, but we don't have enough available parking, so
They go someplace else.
they go somewhere else.
Well, actually, I don't agree with that totally, because I have been looking at the spaces available on the street areas, and it depends when the peak times are. Peak times, I think with those 13 spots that are in Riverside Park, if they were freed up and actually the people were made to go to a 1-hour limit in there or a 2-hour limit, you'd see a lot more parking available for the surrounding stores down there. The area that I do see a lot of traffic blockage with the parking spots are more so where everybody goes to eat, say the eateries. They have a little bit more difficult situation. And I have to be quite frank, it doesn't help when you have business owners with their own vehicles park out front themselves and then worried about why somebody doesn't have a place to park. I know years back, we had someone come in even and talk about the parking problem, but yet that person seems to particularly park there. I don't want to throw any names, but at that time I offered, there's parking up past my house. Nobody parks up there. And it's not a timed, parking limit. So these are my ideas, and let's see if anybody else has any other ideas for Riverside Park. This is my idea. During business hours, whether business hours be, say, 8 to 6, basically, you do have somebody, and if the police department feels they're understaffed, that they would need somebody additional to come. This way, if you start handing out tickets, and I hate to be, business unfriendly, but it actually ends up being friendly to the businesses because customers coming in have a place to park. Then, evening hours, I think the greatest thing to do would be raise some funds for the town, which we're always screaming we don't have enough of, instead of raising taxes, set some fees down there if somebody wants to get a parking permit for overnight. This way, it opens that up to making money for people who don't have a place to park, and it brings revenue in for the town. So I'd like to hear what other thoughts are, because we're going to discuss Riverside Park this evening. Does anybody else have any thoughts that they've thought of?
From a law
Can I comment? Have you been there?
Go ahead.
When I was commissioner, we did the same, just what Charlie's talking about. And Kent was chief, and we had 3 specials at the time. And we were dealing primarily with the front of the courthouse. And we already have a 2-hour parking ordinance. If you talk about 10 to 6, you don't have to enforce it, or 8 to 6, you don't have to enforce it until 10 o'clock, nor after 4. Because there is 2 hours left on either end of that. And we did the chalking of the tires in front of the courthouse, and it made money. We used a special, and what happened is you come in and enforce the tickets on Monday. Boy, there's plenty of space there on Tuesday. And by Thursday, well, maybe you go back and you do half as well. And the following week, It's, every courthouse knows, there's nobody out there, and it all falls back into place. So your 2-hour parking is what you don't have any different ordinance other than to make that area affected by the 2-hour parking ordinance that's in existence. The overnight parking concept destroys it, and I said this at the council meeting this winter. All you have to do is look at the tire marks in Riverside Park. If that car didn't move, there were no tracks in the snow. There were, on average, at the time, as I remember, there were 7 or 8 cars that didn't move day or night. So you do your overnight permit to park there when you stay out, but the park's not still going to be empty if you don't have permits. That doesn't affect business because it's not open that late.
Right, right.
You run until whatever the 2-hour parking lot ordinance is, what, 8 to 6 now. So it's 10 to 4, you're dealing with enforcing it. You have to put somebody out there a couple hours, 2 or 3 days a week, and you're making money on the tickets. System was all in place. I don't know why it stopped. I don't know why the previous situation, you were here, but there was a reason why.
It was before I was here, actually, that there was complaints that galore and it could be that we didn't have enough to cover.
It's real simple to do. It's just exactly what Charlie's talking about.
Right.
Bring it back and it's a little different mechanics.
The biggest thing, the overnight parking just throws a maintenance issue in there that just becomes,
Snow plowing,
well, not even that. I'm just thinking
it's
from,
an issue.
I think that the key is to try and keep this off the full-time officers. You know, we're so short-staffed, I mean, we can all go out there and we can find a million things that we wish maybe our officers were addressing right now. We don't have time. They're doing something else. It's not that they're ever sitting around. So parking isn't something that I'd really want to see them out there doing all the time, especially a nighttime issue then.
Well, I never quite understand. We used a special officer.
Well, that's what I'm saying. No, I agree with you.
And that's,
But if we go to start permit parking, then we're gonna have, well, you're supposed to be out of there at 8 o'clock, you got a ticket at 10, but I had an emergency. It just becomes, now you're in a court issue, and it just, if you keep it really simple, 2-hour parking.
2-hour hours, everything after that is.
I'll be honest with you, the person's productivity would probably determine how many hours they would work, they're a part-time person. I'm sure they're limited.
Well, that's what I was just gonna ask you, what are you estimating to add as far as a line for that, Charlie?
We don't know yet.
Do you have
Like I
any
said, I wasn't ready. You
guess?
pushed me to guess, I did. We don't have all
Well,
the
no,
facts.
this is why we're having this, to talk about
I
parking.
don't know. But I will assure you this, it will not cost the town anything. If any, it will definitely be, a positive number, it will not be a negative number.
Absolutely, it was at the time. And if you put permits in there,
It's a no-brainer.
$10 a night, everybody's paying is there, otherwise it's empty.
And, there's a lot of personnel out there in the municipality, but they don't even have to be in the municipality here, as they know it, that are already qualified, certified, law enforcement officers that may be retired that would love that. I know some colleagues that would say, this is a great job for together. They just want to work a couple hours a day or a week or.
The question we have, probably have.
So we're not even talking training, we're just, we could bring somebody on board and start them in a day.
If you can do that, like crossing guards, it's fine. What I ran into then was, you had to create a parking authority, they had to be, I talked with people in Phillipsburg, it's the structure. If you do it within the crossing guard definition in the police department, it solves a big problem.
Well, you say with
Thank you.
title one.
Laurel, you have.
I was just going to say, we talk about the parking at the courthouse. Recently, I had jury duty, and I can say that the jury manager does tell the people about the 2-hour parking.
Yep.
She also says, is there anybody within these areas I'm discussing that has their car parked there? She gave them 15 minutes to get out and move their cars. So the courthouse is doing their job. We're just not enforcing it, so I think this is a great
Right.
idea.
It's in that parking thing we were talking about that I rewrote almost 10 years ago. I specified loading docks. Loading docks with those situations, the loading docks have a limit on them, all that goes away.
Okay, anybody else with Riverside Park?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit ahead of ourselves because we don't have any signage down there at all.
No.
And I think that was my understanding, was that we were going to develop what the parameters were going to be for Riverside Park, because the signs that we had were 2-hour parking or handicapped. I don't know what all the signage was, and I don't know, we apparently didn't have an ordinance to put them up.
Apparently not, that's why I
So
asked.
we just applied whatever the 2-hour parking was for the rest of the town to that particular hunk of geography, and the state took exception to it. But that was my understanding, that are we gonna have that a 2-hour parking lot, period, no overnight parking, which is, I believe, the way it was? Or are we gonna have some
Well, that's what we're.
cocktail?
That's
Well,
what
you
we're
really use the
discussing.
existing ordinance for the 2-hour parking, and you do,
You just
Linda's
include
not
the
gonna have-
Riverside Park.
So it falls under the same ordinance?
You use the existing parking ordinance as written with the fines. You simply add Riverside Park
Exactly.
municipal parking.
Well, there actually are some sections of town that are 15-minute, there's some sections that
There's
are
only
30-minute.
But
They're all
posted.
down.
They're all
Right.
posted. They're all
They're in
posted.
ordinance.
Yeah.
and you don't need them.
So anything that would be activated in Riverside Park, we could refer to the ordinance that we already have for 2-hour parking.
Exactly.
If I could add just more complications.
Sure, go
Um,
right ahead. That's what they're here for.
Riverside Park is now Green Acres property, so you are required to follow some of those. And I don't know if you all remember, I think I maybe sent a memo or an email a while back. It's on your Rossi now.
Yes.
Because you took it from the state of New Jersey.
Yes.
So it's considered open space. Right, that was the piece you just took from the state
What
of New
was the
Jersey?
purpose of swapping deeds for open space property and land to become municipal property?
Because the state wanted it.
That's yours now, and then you gave them a different piece. But now you
Could
control
you-
it.
Could you look up
We
what?
control it, so then we're responsible.
You are. The
So
reason I say
it's
it's
maintained.
Green Acres, I don't mean it's owned by the, meaning it's municipal property. You can't bar the public from entering it, things like that.
You have to follow their guidelines.
Yeah.
Right,
Could
but-
you get us a copy of what the guidelines are?
I'm getting way ahead.
Getting way ahead of
Yes,
you.
all I wanted to tell you is, so I reached out to the DEP just to say, you know, this is a parking lot, we want to regulate the parking. Do you have any restrictions on our regulation of the parking lot? Because I can tell you, the Township of Harmony has a lot of problems with their riverfront property, because people are parking down there and doing all sorts of things. And what they tell me is you can't bar access, so I just want to see what you were dealing with.
Bar acts meaning they have to be able to pull in and pull out.
That's a little different, yeah, they want to be able, actually what they say is, you can bar people from bringing their cars onto this property, this, in Harmony in particular, you can't stop people from car top. Like if you want to stop with your kayak and get into the river, they can't stop them because it's Green Acres property. In your case, their goal is for the people using the parking lots to be using the riverfront property. So they had no objection to time limits on your parking, they had no objection to even meters on your parking.
Okay.
They don't want the residents who live around to park overnight.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, perhaps if that's something that the council really wanted, it sounds like some people say that maybe not where we want to go. If it was, we could attempt to make the argument that the park is closed after dark, so we're using it when you can't use the river type thing, but their idea was they wanted you to restrict overnight, and they wanted maybe a time limit, because then it was people using the park as opposed to business owners parking their cars while they were running their business.
So their vision is a parking lot, not a municipal parking lot. Our vision is a municipal parking
But
lot.
they're not restricting you from using it that way. They're allowing you to put in very general controls that will allow it to still be a municipal parking lot. They just want to make sure that you're not making rules that are making it hard for people to use the park.
Basically, it's just gotta be fair and equitable for everybody.
Yeah, so
Just, in other words, we can't say it's just municipal residents and,
Right.
it's real simple.
Right, so
We're
2-hour
not-
parking, no overnight.
We're light years
parking,
away
that's
from
short.
anything, we don't
I think
want
so.
Just right here.
And that's already,
Well, with one exception, but I'll leave that till we get further down the line.
Katrina,
How does that rule about making money off of Green Acres property concern
Well, it's not
this?
Green Acres. I should have better chosen my words.
Well, it was
It's-
purchased with Green Acres money.
No, that's why you're,
No.
that's why I'm
It's-
saying, we're getting ahead of
It's
ourselves.
on your
by
open
explaining it
space
right.
inventory is what I should have said. It's on your Rossi.
Well, how did the state acquire it?
It doesn't matter how they acquired it. They gave it, we did it in a land swap. It is just
Okay.
on your Rossi.
All right.
It's just like if you owned a piece of wooded property and you leased it for hunting. You can do that. You can lease it to a hunt club for
Right.
hunting, you can lease it to a farmer for farming, you can do all those things. It just has to, you still have to allow public access.
We'll lease it for duck hunting. Right there.
What'd you say? Duck hunting?
You're gonna lease it for duck hunting.
Isn't there a little bit of,
It'd be a little close.
closeness there, Charlie?
But really, I mean,
There's a lot of ducks.
I agree with this guy. With our parking rules and regulations, I don't really think we need a lot of parking there.
You just have to, whatever you decide, you have to make sure your ordinance, so
Covers
if
it.
it's merely adding the name Riverside Park to where your 2-hour parking section, then that's all you need to do. And then the signs
So
would,
you just amend the ordinance
I
to
think,
include those municipal parking lots or lot?
Is there a limit of, I don't know how many spaces are there?
13.
There's 13.
Believe me, I've been in there.
How many are we regulated to have that we need for handicap? Any? There's gotta be something in there.
there might be, I could have Paul Sterling.
It can't be more than two.
John Snyder will know.
Right, John was.
I think it is about 2, Charlie,
I think it's one.
from what, a 1.
Yeah,
think
it's
so.
pretty small.
I was saying, Paul Sterling will know right off the top of his head.
Yeah, I think so, John.
Yeah.
John did all the signage,
And John's a great
Before.
one.
and John also
And-
took them all down.
What I personally would like is some kind of signage out front, and you steer me if it's even possible, Town of Belvedere Municipal Parking Lot, or parking, something to identify that somebody's going up the street, they can see, oh, I can park there and run to the stores. So I don't know,
You
and
can decide however you want to do your signage, just to comply with your ordinance. It could be a big general sign when you pull in the parking lot, all spaces, 2-hour parking, and you write the ordinance number on the bottom of the sign. Each space could have it, you can decide as long as, if you want more than one sign, you want a directional sign in, and then a rules and regulations type sign. You could make it as part of your park sign, you could do.
now, Joe, you had something that you wanted to bring up, but you didn't want to bring up
had something else.
till later,
Well,
regarding Riverside. I would rather have everything out on the table now, so that when we go forward with Riverside, and what was that?
Oh, I think one of the key things that's going to be probably put to bed and addressed moving forward, having this municipal park. First of all, I don't think there's enough parking spots that will satisfy all the patrons and businesses downtown. You made a very good point, Mayor, when you said the eateries take up the majority of that space from 5:30 in the morning all the way through 3 o'clock, 3:30. Because that business, they just on a rotate basis. So it takes up a lot of parking spaces. So in my opinion, even satisfying Riverside Park is not going to be adequate enough spaces. But the point that I had with Riverside Park was one of the things that should be included in Riverside Park. I understand everybody's Xing overnight parking, whatever have you. The only thing that I'm asking in a recommendation is we simply put a red and white plate on there that anytime there's a snow emergency in the town of Belvedere, that we allow overnight parking at that time. Because as you know, we've gone for years and years trying to locate a place for people to park overnight during snowstorms. So all I'm asking is just to consider that. That's, not a must, but if we're looking for available parking for a snow emergency, that may be something that you want to consider. That's all.
Now, I know, Laurel, you had already stated with that situation,
I'm just
you would
concerned
not
about
like it.
No, I'm just saying, I think we have to have John Snyder lean in on this, because I'd be concerned about them having
The
to
clearing.
plow that parking lot. I mean, we had such an issue go on about losing the parking lot at the Cummins Building because it was abused. If we even give a time frame, it's questionable. So I think we have to have John speak on
Weigh in
that.
on
Well,
that.
again, with all due respect, I think that's probably one of the reasons why Councilman McAtola wanted to make sure that all the facts and discussions were had between.
Well, it's
the
good
chief
though that
and
we're
yourself.
really getting
No,
this out on
no,
the
yeah,
table.
no question.
Yeah. Now, handicap parking, anything to be brought up this evening since we are under municipal parking? Is the chief going to recommend additional spots, or what was he gonna do, Charlie?
Katrina, wouldn't that be based on the size of the lot and the
Well, in Riverside Park itself, yes.
Are you talking about beyond?
I know.
Oh, yeah, is there any
In
issues?
the past, you had asked me, or about Mill Street, about parking, because there was some confusion whether those are individual spots and that's for a particular person, or it's more of a zone where anyone who's handicapped can park in that spot. And I think there's some confusion over what that spot is, and I can't remember now. I think I went out there and took a picture of it, and I think it's a general spot. It's not, and our ordinance seems to talk about specific spots as opposed to
I
general.
saw that
So,
today, yeah.
well, while we're tweaking things, when we're fixing that section, we may want to do, what a lot of towns do is they say, general spots, and then you can list where those are if you have some of those. Or if someone has a specific one, like a resident has come in, and then you actually put their permit number, and that's kind of what your current ordinance talks about, is someone applying. And sometimes they do that, they'll give someone in front of their residence, if they live on, they have on-street parking, make one spot for them. But then on the sign, it actually says their permit number, and so only the person with that permit, so if another handicapped person came along, they're not supposed to park in that spot. So it's just kind of it's a policy type decision, but the way
To clean it up,
your
though.
ordinance reads now, it seems like it's only for specific ones, but then I don't know that you actually have specific ones out in practice.
We don't
do
have
not
permit
have
numbers,
specific.
correct?
We do not
But
Yeah.
your ordinance seems like that's the
It
only.
does.
That's what it's
thing.
directed
Right.
at.
Yeah, so I would just, while we're, it doesn't
Yeah.
cost any more while we're,
As a matter of fact, when someone has requested them, we've been quite clear that it was a general spot, even though it was granted by the town. If someone came and parked there, that doesn't mean it's your handicap spot. We put one in front of your place or wherever.
and where I've seen it is, most, I'll say most, some of the places have just general spots, but where I've seen it is when there's a parking issue. So for example, someone lived in front of, and there were businesses around, and there was a resident, and they could never find a spot. If you give them you give a general handicap spot, someone else who's
Park there.
patronizing a business will park there, and they'll never get to use, which defeats them. So sometimes they do that,
But are you saying then our current ordinance is contrary to the general parking lot space and more designed for specific, so we should amend that to go to the general zone?
Well, you can do both, and I'll give you a sample, I'll send everyone a sample. I think most towns kind of use the same format, but Harmony, Lopat, they all
So we
have.
put it all
And
together.
basically, you don't even have to have them. If you don't have them, you just write reserved and it's blank. But then later, if you thought of it, if someone came to you and said, I'd really like a specific one, all you have to do is add that one in. You don't have to rewrite your ordinance. They're just kind of placeholders of the different kinds of handicap spots you can have. But I'll send everyone a copy so you can just take a look and tweak what they have.
Okay. Kathy, then you submitted for the PAC a request coming, I guess, directly to you
Yes.
from a property owner, and I'll let you lead that off.
Yeah, I was approached by Larry Scoop, who owns the former municipal lot downtown, to see if we would be interested in renting in lieu of taxes and/or fee the parking area. This is, I think, particularly timely because the AMP is closing November 20th, and I think everything that we can do to help our downtown merchants keep the business in town would be prudent. This is not something that's unusual. The parking lot owner prior to Larry also rented it to the town as a municipal lot in lieu of taxes. So we discussed, because it was timely, some of the things that he would like us to consider if we were going to pursue this rental arrangement or lease arrangement, which would more than double our parking in
Okay.
downtown.
Do you want to read down terms that you discussed with him?
Sure. He'd like $5,000 a year for the entire parking lot. Snow removal would be handled by the town. The sidewalks that are on Water Street and Market Street would be maintained by the town. The business frontage sidewalks would be maintained by the business owner. There would be 4 parking spots along the fence of Market Street for the dog owners. And those, I know just can drop my own dog off, you don't hang out. Go, take your dog, you leave, you come back, get your dog. Liability insurance would be provided by the town. There would be no overnight parking and there would be no rental parking spots. So it would have to be, I think, to be fair, parking regulations we enact at Riverside Park. You don't want to have one set of rules at one spot, one set of rules at another. So I thought it was important that we discuss this all as one package, if we're going to consider going forward and leasing additional parking downtown.
I had a couple of questions. I called our insurance agent today. I bounced off the idea that literally, yes, he does want to rent the entire parking lot, but then as you see later down here, it does take out certain spots. But he only wants to do it part-time, meaning none during the evening, which I reached out to Sharon, and you're here tonight, Sharon, so you can elaborate if the insurance company is willing to take on liability for something that would not be the town's that night.
Well, I don't
I don't see that at all. It doesn't, it is the
That's not part
town's.
of the discussion. It's ours.
It says right here.
It says no overnight parking, that's our
No
responsibility.
Overnight parking, meaning you don't leave your car there overnight.
Is he going to enforce that?
No, it would be our lot. We are renting the
How
lot.
many spots? Because there's 4 taken out here.
Well, no, they're only on a daytime, and we can remove that if that's not, I mean, that's up for discussion. And if we're gonna rent the entire space.
So if it's not allowed at nighttime,
No,
you're
it's
literally
no
renting part-time.
overnight. No overnight parking, meaning you can't leave your car there overnight any more than you can leave your car overnight at Riverside Park.
Is he going to get that off then to ensure that?
No, it's our property. It's our property to maintain and enforce and control and insure.
I don't know, I'm a bit confused, Sharon, so I don't know how you would do that and still have the town insurance company.
Insured it for years. If we're leasing, correct me if I'm wrong, if we are leasing and we have an annual lease to rent that property for the town of Belvedere, the town of Belvedere is responsible for insurance because we have a lease with that business owner for that town municipal parking.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Which equates to roughly, there's 20 spots there, less 4 is roughly 16. If you look at the parking lot in the whole, it's a lease of $13 plus a day, which equates to about 68 cents a parking spot a day to service the downtown residents. And the reason I think it's viable is, why should a senior have to, no disrespect, I mean, we're fortunate, we're healthy enough to do that. But if we can help the seniors put them closer and they can park to something that they're accustomed to and be able to walk across the street rather than walking down past the mayor's house, we know what happens when the mayor walks down and falls in a pothole. You know, it's a greater liability. So,
Yes.
all jokes aside.
We know that the mayor does not sue.
So when you look at the cost, and the things and the issues, it can really help economic development and businesses downtown and opening the parking. It's really just a viable suggestion when you look at it as a whole. And I agree with Councilwoman Myers and Councilman McAtora, is we should have it, whether it's Riverside Park and whatever you want to call the other one, whether municipal parking lot A or municipal park, there should be absolute consistency there, just for enforcement purposes alone. And the historic history, we've done it before. So we have a great opportunity here when you understand even just A&P closing, the possible business that can be brought to Lynn's Food Mart. And I don't look at it just being business being brought to Lynn's Food Mart. We potentially going to have a significant amount of more people doing business at Lynn's Food Mart that's going to look across the street and say, well, I didn't know they had a barber shop here. I didn't know Ray Sol Jewelers was here.
Uncle
You know, I didn't so there is a potential, and I can only say potential because again, I don't have a crystal ball, but this is the way I look at it when I'm thinking about economic development and everything in the future. For that small expense to start the revitalization possibly, to me, there's value there. Again, when I reflect back to snow emergencies and just discussions that I've been involved with over the last 2 or 3 years, in my opinion only, I think it's a viable thing that we should consider.
I think it also would perhaps initiate a little more interest in what was the Hearth Shop on the corner. That it would sell
They would fill shops.
if
No place
they
to
had an
park.
opportunity to park. Even they have apartments upstairs, someone can go shopping and bring your,
We've all experienced it, you drive through there, sometimes it's amazing, there's no place to park.
That's right.
It's like, so.
I
And
actually,
I think the big concern from economic development has been, the very primary concern has been the lack of parking downtown.
Absolutely.
actually, I did make calls, I don't know if anybody else did, and I'm not gonna say people's names, but I did a smattering all over town, I even did a White Township resident. And I asked on a scale of 1 to 10, did anybody, would 10 be in the highest of having a hard time to find a spot, park downtown? And not anybody said, well, you might have had to drive around once or something, but you found a spot.
And that's the key. You know, you're talking the local residents that want to be here. You're not talking about the person driving through town or the person coming from Pennsylvania that happens to see something and wants to stop. Yeah, you're talking to all the people that want to be here, so that's kind of
They know
very
that
biased.
actually they, a couple spins around the block and something's gonna open.
Well, I think that
We want to be able
happens.
to incorporate and invite someone who's coming down Water Street and they're at the light and say, oh, there's a jeweler up there. I want to go stop and get my ring fixed or a battery for my watch. And there's no place to park.
Well,
No, the bulk of
truthfully,
the advertising on the antique shop is Hunterdon County, and he has a good clientele coming up. They're gonna come up here and can't park, they're not coming back.
actually, I've gone different times, I even asked Councilman Seabold about if he's had any trouble, and I will say his name because he sits here. But I think if you're gonna rent something, you're gonna rent it for the entire time. You are.
We are, but we're not allowing overnight.
Well, wait a minute, we're going to rent spots from a business owner that is gonna have his own customers parking there.
Because they're,
They would
But
be
you're
down by
still
the same.
During business hours.
During business hours, he's reserving
They
for
could park
spots.
here to do business at
Any-
his shop as well as they could run to Food Mart to get something and then go get their coffee at Scoob's to go.
They're full,
I
the
mean,
entire,
I think they're 20.
and how many is he offering?
20, the whole lot.
I think.
All the spots even in front of his business?
Even in front of his
That's
business?
correct.
Yes,
Oh,
That's,
okay.
the planters would come out,
And I-
the chains come down, and
yeah, everything, the access would be from Market Street and from Water Street. It would be everything, and we can say, forget the Scooby-Doo reserved spots, and, you know, people can drop off and, you know,
Yeah, they don't encourage you to loiter there.
They
Drop them and go. They don't encourage you to
You're not
loiter.
staying there,
Yeah.
you're dropping.
Yeah, you know, so that would be,
Problem.
that would be, you know, immaterial, I think.
Did you reach out to John Laurel to see, say, if we have an average of 15
He
storms?
saw no problem.
He didn't
I asked him if there was, I said.
do
the
a
only
workup
issue-
of
I
a
said-
projection of what the cost would be?
No, he said he didn't see any issue.
Well, it may not be
Cost
an issue,
now.
but there's cost for snow removal if they have to move that out.
He said that would be included within the downtown district. He said he didn't see it as a problem.
I don't look at it as just $5,000 truthfully, I look at it as a lot more. I would like written up from John, how much on an average winter, what he's gonna spend in salt, what the time is for the guys. Don't tell me the guys are just gonna snap their fingers and it's all gonna be hunky-dory down there. It takes hours to clean snow from sidewalks, the rock salt that has to be put down. What happens insurance-wise, Sharon, if that property gets damaged by us? Insurance is gonna cover it?
If it gets damaged, how?
Paving with a snow
Plowing.
plow, curbs.
It's not an insurance issue, that's.
Well, I'd like this up front, I'd like all these things up
I
front.
didn't hear what she said.
Go
It was
ahead.
an insurance issue, and then you asked what you mentioned.
And that's your issue, if you break the curb
You
into
fix it.
pieces, you fix it, but that's, you don't turn that into
but don't we do
insurance.
that if we do the same thing to any curb out of the 11.2 miles we have in town? Or if we do the same thing with manhole cover, or the same thing if we get a
You
mailbox?
break it, you fix it.
So pretty much the
Well,
same
if
thing.
it's a
correct?
mailbox, it's somebody else's mailbox, that's different, although you
I
can't
didn't
tell.
know what.
But, I mean, yeah, if it's a curb or a mailbox, that's, you don't turn that into insurance. And if you're renting it, you're leasing it, then you're responsible for it, so it's just like your own.
Correct.
That's all.
I don't know, what I'm hearing is the majority of the council is in favor of taking the next step to see.
I feel like we've been fighting for years to try and get Riverside Park so we can control the parking and give the town parking. Now we got this great opportunity for an insignificant amount of money.
I'm just saying, I'm for pursuing it.
To
So,
tell
I'm
our
happy to be for-
And we're talking a one-year lease. If it doesn't work,
Yeah, that's what I was
we
gonna
don't
say.
renew the lease.
Exactly.
Yeah, do it for a year and then, you know,
This is-
revisit it.
Let me ask the attorney one legal question. Would it be considered a conflict of interest if there were council people sitting up here that during a political primary or general election had signs there posted, and this is going to be a financial gain for the property owner?
I don't think so. I
Man, that
think
is
you can
just
put,
so
you can put your
inappropriate.
signs, you can put your signs up anywhere, and you can put them on private residence, because then you have to go around town and say, okay, well, we can't fix the side, can't vote on fixing the sidewalk in front of their house, because they have the sign there, and you have to keep track, and I understand what your question is.
It looks bad, yeah.
Mayor,
Yeah, I would not
Well,
personally.
let me just interrupt there.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion, yes.
I don't think there's any problem with them discussing any or voting on it.
Okay, all right.
I personally wasn't up for election, I had no signs out, and this is after the fact, so that was just totally uncalled for.
No, I don't think
You
it-
just,
I don't think it
you are
was.
just,
I don't think it
obviously,
was.
you're very dead set against us, that's fine.
No, I'm dead set against getting into something that's not financially beneficial for the
This is
town.
just-
It is beneficial.
This is incredible to get this opportunity, to try it for a year, for
Well,
$5,000.
I would consider doing a part of the parking lot that is not utilized by Scoop. I would do a part of it for a lesser amount.
Linda, how long have you lived here? You're talking about,
Over 40
you're talking
years.
about taking that place back to what it was. And I'm the guy who's guilty of fighting with Larry over it.
You
He
fought
changed
with
it.
him?
What?
You fought with him?
Oh, no kidding.
I'm not fighting with him, I am looking
I would
at.
like to make a
I'm talking
motion that we
history.
authorize the attorney to pursue drafting an agreement that would incorporate the items that were listed on
With-
this attachment.
I say.
We have a motion, without even looking at the financial from the DPW.
Second, too.
Yeah, we do, and I, questions or comments?
In the old days, he got
We have a
taxed
motion on the
with
floor, sorry,
$5,000.
Des, I cannot.
Yeah.
Questions or comments, I do have one. You want to move forward without financially looking how it's going to cost-wise affect the DPW?
The question's been asked and answered.
Well, the answer was it's not been looked into.
I believe
No, I
the-
disagree.
I
I
believe
think
the
the
director of
experts-
DPW has been given the inquiry.
No problem doesn't mean how much it will cost. I want a cost analysis. Apparently, nobody else does.
It's not gonna snow this year, so the cost for the snow removal will be zero. Is that fair? I mean, you can't do a cost analysis on something you don't know how to predict the weather.
Yeah,
Is this right away, or this is, we're not looking to do this this year?
Well, that's what you're
Yeah, we're
voting
looking
on,
at
right?
I thought we were kind of tight with our money, I don't know.
Oh, we are, that's more a question I would have for Councilman Kennedy.
Yeah. or
Well, if you want to.
Oh, I'm
You
sorry, I
haven't-
misunderstood, if it was in
Well,
the
here's,
middle of
I think
tax.
here's the golden
Okay,
goose.
so
I mean, the fact that A&P is closing,
That's the way it
Is that what you were-
I
I misunderstood that.
Yeah.
I just saw it.
once here.
Yeah. The request was made by the property owner to do it in lieu of taxes, which has been done before. That would be something that the tax collector would be able to address with us. That would be the preferable vehicle.
So we're
After
gonna,
that, it would be payment.
we would refund money you spent already? for this year?
No,
You said in lieu of, that's my question also, Mike. You're saying in lieu of taxes.
in lieu of taxes for that chunk of money, $5,000. His taxes for that piece of property are more than that.
Could we have the attorney check to see if that is legal?
And authorizing me to draft it, I would check before I put that document.
Right, and any terms and conditions that were not appropriate for that
I
type
was
of
just
thing.
gonna ask once, while we're having a discussion, just, there was talk about being consistent to what we talked about for Riverside Park. Would you like in there, he said no overnight parking, but would you like to allow snow emergency parking? So I'll make sure I put that in there.
We can put it in, we can always.
You don't have to use it for snow emergency, you're
We
just
can
getting
always-
a right from him to do it.
Right.
Okay. He may, you know, I didn't know if you
I
thought
think
you might
I
say no.
want to do apples and apples. That would be my recommendation, just because you don't want one parking lot to be, okay, let's all the snow people go there.
And personal, my personal, and just personal opinion, I think we should just do a one-year lease agreement. And taxes shouldn't be involved with it. So basically, if we did it for 1 year, the balance of this year, let's say from November 20th to December 31st, would be approximately, in answer to your question, Michael,
Yeah, that's what I
would be
understand.
approximately $500 or $600.
So we would pay that.
So we would pay that for this year.
If it's- Yeah, to
You
reflect
know,
tax.
So that's what the cost would be. I know you were concerned with the whole budget, which is a great question because I've been handling it. I think for a cost of between $500 or $600, it's worth to get it for the balance of this year. And then next year would be the $5,000 sum. And then it can be handled by your finance and your budget people of next year.
So would this be something that would be visited every year? Or
Absolutely.
Just a
And
line?
I think it's a very,
Maybe
very
you
good
put that
point. I
in.
think the option should be that Belvedere can pull out of that agreement at the end of any lease. So that's why it's very important to do the lease agreement for 1 year.
Yeah, okay.
So you have that opportunity.
So right now you want it for just from now to the end of the year.
Yes.
The now to the, now.
November 20th,
I would say 14 months.
Right, exactly.
14 months.
So all
14
14
months.
basically 5,000 for
Right.
216.
Correct.
Gotcha.
14 months, but you wanted to pay
Prorated.
Prorated.
prorated in cash, and then the rest you wanted in lieu of tax.
If
December
possible.
31st, 2016.
Sure.
If not, then,
Just
then
want to understand, assuming it's all legal, I wanted to see what your preference was.
Correct.
Okay, and if that's not it, then I'll come back and tell you.
So we're looking to expire December 31st, 2016.
Correct.
But actually, probably with all this going on, probably December, 1 month prorated,
That's
starting
fine.
in December. You
December
get all the
1st.
work done this month
Yeah.
for the paperwork and everything.
Well, for the second meeting in November, yes.
Right.
because I think, you know, the timeliness of the AMP departing, which is unfortunate, you don't want people getting into a different pattern of shopping when you have the opportunity to get them to stay in town and spend their money downtown.
And we would have the same signage at that municipal parking lot as well as Riverside.
Correct.
So people would know it.
Correct.
I think it's a win for the town.
I think it's a win-win, but I think at the right price, and really a study should have been done by John at least to calculate what this additional cost is going to be. And also, I know in the past that we've had free work done and things have happened where equipment has gotten damaged, and then that free ended up costing thousands and thousands of dollars. So I'm very cautious when I look at anything that is being proposed by anybody in this town. I think we're really moving too quickly on this, but we will, if anybody doesn't have any other comment from council, we will go for a roll call. Councilman Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilman McAtoy?
Yes.
Councilwoman Myers?
Yes.
Councilwoman Napolitano?
Yes.
Councilman Petrie?
Yes.
Councilman Seabold?
Yes.
Mayor Stetler? No. Okay, motion passes. You'll work on that, you'll check on the legality, and we'll go from there. All right, anything else under municipal parking? Any further? Okay, if not,
Just, yeah, you're talking about the signage, Nick, is that, how quickly can we get signage?
Oh,
Well,
that's not a problem. He gets that pretty quick, the signs.
I think we had one that we took down.
weeks.
Yeah.
Until it's
They
in
can
your
read.
Polish them up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure he has.
Just to be clear, until it's in your ordinance, you can't enforce.
I was just gonna say.
So you can put the signs up, you can't write that ticket.
Heads up, we'll give them a 30-day heads up. This is what's gonna happen. This is a preview of coming attractions.
Charlie, if the signage goes up, you'll just instruct the department just to write warnings and maybe specifically spell out on warnings that, you know, you have X amount of days warning, that's it. And
So what,
I'm sure
it'll
the
take 2
officers
readings
will
for the
document
ordinance?
the vehicles, the
Yes.
makes, the plates, whatever.
And you have to give the police department a kudo.
Okay.
I learned that you cannot park within 50 feet of the stop sign.
Oh, how did you?
$4.
How much?
$54 lesson.